A person who has spent decades building a reputation for kindness, positivity, and lifting others up walks onto a talk show expecting a friendly conversation, and instead encounters sustained malicious attacks on his character from a host with an agenda. What happens when Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, the man famous for his infectious smile and genuine warmth, the actor who responds to every fan message personally, who tips servers thousands of dollars, who visits sick children without cameras present, sits down on The View and discovers that Joy Behar has prepared not questions about his work, but a systematic character assassination based on fabricated controversies and invented accusations. This isn't just another uncomfortable celebrity interview. This isn't another moment of television tension that gets smoothed over with apologies. This is the story of how Joy Behar, motivated by some inexplicable need to destroy someone universally loved, spent 30 brutal minutes attacking Dwayne Johnson's masculinity, his charity work, his authenticity, and even his political beliefs with accusations she couldn't substantiate. And how Johnson, with the patience of a saint being tested beyond all reason, finally reached a moment when even infinite grace has limits. By the time he walked off that stage with his dignity intact, millions of viewers would witness what true strength looks like, not muscles or movie roles, but the courage to stand up to cruelty while maintaining compassion for the person inflicting it. The morning began with electric anticipation at the View studios. Dwayne Johnson was scheduled to appear, and everyone from production assistants to audience members to the hosts themselves buzzed with genuine excitement. This was The Rock, not just a movie star, but a cultural phenomenon, a man whose social media posts about gratitude and hard work inspired millions, whose stories about his struggles with depression had helped destigmatize mental health conversations, whose legendary work ethic and kindness had made him one of the most universally admired figures in entertainment. Johnson arrived with his characteristic warmth and that megawatt smile that could light up a stadium. Fresh off promoting his latest blockbuster, already breaking box office records, he seemed relaxed and energized, ready for what he expected would be another opportunity to connect with people, to make them laugh, to inspire them with his journey from having $7 in his pocket to becoming one of the highest-paid actors in the world. He wore a simple but perfectly fitted suit that somehow made his imposing frame look approachable rather than intimidating. His demeanor radiated that unique combination of confidence and humility that had made him beloved across demographics. What Johnson didn't know, what he had no reason to suspect, was that Joy Behar had spent the previous evening preparing what she believed would be her tough interview moment. Not thoughtful questions about his craft or his business acumen, or even legitimate challenges about his political positions, but a premeditated attack designed to tear down his image, to expose what she convinced herself was a carefully constructed facade hiding toxic masculinity and Hollywood hypocrisy. In her mind, she was planning to strip away the veneer and reveal the real Dwayne Johnson. What she had actually prepared was a demonstration of her own capacity for baseless cruelty. The View set glowed with familiar warm lighting as Johnson made his entrance to absolutely thunderous applause. The studio audience rose as one not the polite standing ovation that comes from social obligation, but genuine excitement for someone they admired. Phones came out capturing the moment. People were smiling, cheering, radiating the kind of positive energy that Johnson himself had always embodied. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dwayne Johnson, Whoopi Goldberg announced, her voice carrying genuine warmth and respect. Johnson waved the crowd, his charismatic presence immediately filling every corner of the studio. This was what he did naturally, made people feel good just by being himself. "Thank you so much for having me," he said, settling into his chair with that easy confidence born from decades of connecting with people. "Always great to be here with you ladies." The other hosts, Sunny host, Sarah Haynes, Alyssa Farrah Griffin were all genuine smiles and warm energy. Even Joy Behar seemed pleasant enough during the initial pleasantries, though anyone paying close attention might have noticed something calculating in her eyes, something that suggested the warmth of performance rather than reality. So, Whoopi began, following the expected script. "Tell us about the new movie. I heard it's already breaking all kinds of records." Johnson's enthusiasm was infectious and completely authentic. "You know, I'm incredibly grateful," he replied, and you could hear that he meant it. "The fans have been absolutely amazing. Working with this cast has been a dream come true. We really wanted to create something special, something that families could enjoy together, action and heart in equal measure. That's wonderful. Sarah chimed in, clearly delighted to be sitting across from someone she admired. And I have to say, your social media posts about the filming process were hilarious. That video of you trying to fit into that tiny trailer had me laughing for days. Johnson's laugh was infectious, the kind that makes everyone around him smile involuntarily. Yeah, well, when you're 6 feet 5 inches and built like I am, even the biggest trailer feels like a dollhouse. But hey, that's part of the fun. You got to be able to laugh at yourself. The conversation flowed naturally for the first several minutes, exactly as it should have. Johnson talked about his daughters with obvious devotion, discussed the production company's commitment to diverse storytelling, and shared his philosophy about choosing roles that would inspire people rather than just make money. The audience was completely engaged, hanging on every word. Even the camera crew seemed more focused than usual. This was the Dwayne Johnson. Everyone loved authentic and humble despite astronomical success. But then Joy Behar shifted in her seat, and something fundamental changed in the room's energy. Those with experience in live television could feel it, that subtle shift from friendly conversation to something darker. Dwayne Joy said, her tone suddenly stripped of warmth, replaced by something that sounded disturbingly like prosecutorial aggression. I have to ask you about something that's been bothering me for quite a while now. Johnson's expression remained pleasant. Years of media training had taught him to maintain composure, but there was a subtle change in his posture, an almost imperceptible tensing that suggested he had recognized the threat. Sure, Joy, he replied carefully. What's on your mind? Joy leaned forward, and her body language shifted from host to prosecutor. Well, I've been watching your career trajectory very closely, and I have to say I'm deeply concerned about the message you're sending to young people, especially young men. The other hosts exchanged worried glances. This conversation topic hadn't been cleared with Johnson's team beforehand. This was an ambush, and everyone except Joy seemed uncomfortable with it. Whoopi's eyebrows raised in concern. Sarah looked like she was trying to figure out where this could possibly be heading. I'm not sure I follow, Johnson replied, his voice still controlled, but now carrying a note of caution. What message are you referring to? This whole macho, muscle-bound, solve everything with violence persona, Joy said, her voice gaining intensity with each word. Don't you think it's deeply problematic in today's society? Don't you think you're perpetuating the worst aspects of toxic masculinity? The studio fell into uncomfortable silence. The audience, which had been buzzing with excitement moments before, suddenly went quiet as they sensed something was very wrong. This wasn't a friendly interview they'd come to witness. Johnson's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained remarkably calm given the nature of the attack. Joy, I think there might be a fundamental misunderstanding here. I've spent my entire career, my entire life, trying to promote positivity, hard work, treating people with respect and dignity. I'm honestly not sure where this accusation is coming from. Oh, please, Joy scoffed, waving her hand dismissively as if Johnson's defense was beneath consideration. Every single movie you're in, you're the big tough guy who saves the day by punching something or someone. What kind of example is that setting for impressionable young boys? Johnson's famous smile faded slightly, but he maintained his composure with visible effort. Joy, I think you're drastically oversimplifying the characters I play. Most of my roles are fundamentally about protecting family, standing up for what's right, overcoming obstacles through determination, perseverance, and yes, teamwork. Teamwork. Joy laughed, but there was zero humor in the sound, only contempt. Come on, Dwayne, let's be honest here. You're selling an image of masculinity that's outdated, regressive, and frankly dangerous. Young boys see you and think they need to be these aggressive, dominating figures who solve problems with physical strength rather than emotional intelligence. The tension in the room was now palpable, almost visible. Sonny looked genuinely uncomfortable. Sarah was staring intently at her notes as if they might provide escape. Whoopi seemed to be calculating whether and how to intervene, but Joy was just getting started, feeding off the discomfort she was creating. And another thing, Joy continued, her voice rising with building momentum. This whole people's champion persona you cultivate on social media. Don't you think it's more than a bit disingenuous? You're worth hundreds of millions of dollars, living in multiple mansions, flying on private jets, and yet you're trying to relate to working-class people struggling to pay rent. Isn't that fundamentally fake? Johnson's hands, would have been resting casually on the armrest of his chair, now gripped them with visible tension. His voice remained controlled, but there was unmistakable steel underneath it now. Joy, I grew up in a genuinely working-class family. My mother cleaned houses to put food on our table. My father was a professional wrestler who didn't always know where his next paycheck would come from. We were evicted multiple times. I know what it means to struggle, and I've never forgotten where I came from. I never will. But that was then. Joy pressed on, seemingly oblivious to, or perhaps energized by the growing tension in the studio. This is now. You can't honestly tell me you understand what it's like for a single mother working 3 jobs just to afford rent and groceries. No, you're absolutely right, Johnson acknowledged, his voice getting quieter in a way that somehow made it more powerful. I can't understand that exact experience anymore, but I can use my platform to amplify their stories, to support organizations that help them, to remind people that their struggles matter and they're not alone. Joy rolled her eyes with theatrical contempt. Oh, here we go with the charity work. Another calculated PR move to make yourself look good while padding your image. That was the moment when something fundamental shifted in Johnson's demeanor. The easygoing charm was still present, but underneath it, you could now see the competitor, the person who had climbed from absolute poverty to the pinnacle of multiple industries through sheer will, determination, and refusing to be broken by adversity. Joy, he said, his voice now carrying a weight that made everyone in the studio sit straighter, pay closer attention. I'm not entirely sure what's prompted the sustained attack on my character, but I think we need to pump the brakes here before this goes somewhere neither of us wants it to go. Attack? Joy laughed again, that harsh, cutting sound that conveyed pure dismissiveness. I'm just asking tough questions. Isn't that what journalism is supposed to be about? Holding public figures accountable? The other hosts were now visibly distressed by where this was heading. Whoopi finally tried to intervene, her voice carrying diplomatic urgency. Maybe we should redirect this conversation to something else, she suggested carefully. But Joy wasn't finished. In fact, she seemed to interpret Whoopi's intervention as license to escalate further. No, I think this is incredibly important, she insisted. Dwayne, you've built this entire carefully curated brand around being this perfect role model. But don't you think there's something deeply problematic about a man your size with your level of influence, promoting physical strength and dominance as the answer to life's problems? Johnson leaned back in his chair, and for a moment, the studio was completely silent except for the mechanical hum of cameras and studio lights. When he spoke again, his voice was calm but carried something final in it, something that suggested he was approaching a line. Joy, I've spent my entire career trying to inspire people to become better versions of themselves. I promoted education, emotional honesty, kindness, hard work, and perseverance through adversity. If you look at my body of work, both on screen and off, and see only violence and toxic masculinity, then I genuinely think that revelation says far more about your perspective than it does about my intentions. Joy's face flushed at Johnson's measured but pointed response. Instead of reconsidering her approach, she seemed to take his defense as a challenge, her voice becoming even sharper and more aggressive. Oh, so now I'm the problem. She shot back, her hands gesturing wildly. I'm the one with a distorted perspective. That's rich coming from someone who makes tens of millions playing the same character over and over again. The audience was completely silent now, the earlier excitement replaced by profound discomfort. Sarah was visibly fidgeting. Sonny was staring at the table with obvious distress. Whoopi looked like she was trying to calculate how to salvage what was rapidly becoming a public relations disaster. Johnson's expression remained controlled, but those who knew how to read subtle signals could see them the slight tightening around his eyes, the more deliberate breathing pattern. This was a man who had learned to channel anger into focus, but even his considerable patience had absolute limits. Joy, he said, his voice still calm, but carrying an unmistakable edge now. I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding here. I came on this show today to talk about my work, to connect with your audience, to share some positivity, and hopefully make people smile. I'm genuinely not sure why you've decided to transform this into a personal character assassination, personal attack. Joy's voice went up an octave. I'm holding you accountable as a public figure. Someone needs to. You walk around acting like you're this impossibly perfect human being. But what about the time you supported that politician who had extremely controversial views about women's reproductive rights? Johnson's eyebrows furrowed with genuine confusion. I'm sorry. What are you referring to? I think you might have your facts significantly wrong. Don't play dumb with me. Joyce snapped with building aggression. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You endorsed someone who wanted to roll back women's rights. And then when it became politically inconvenient for your brand, you tried to quietly distance yourself. Joy, Johnson said, his voice now carrying a warning that everyone in the studio could feel like approaching thunder. I have never endorsed anyone who wanted to harm women's rights in any way. I have 3 daughters, and their future autonomy and freedom is more important to me than anything in this world. If you're going to make serious accusations like that, you better have your facts absolutely straight. The other hosts were now openly uncomfortable. Whoopi looked mortified. Sarah was actually shaking her head in disbelief. Sonny appeared to be fighting back, either tears or anger. It was hard to tell which. Facts. Joy laughed bitterly. The fact is that you're just another Hollywood hypocrite who says one thing in carefully scripted interviews and does something completely different when cameras aren't rolling. You talk about being authentic, but you're as manufactured and calculated as they come. Johnson's hands were now visibly gripping the armrest of his chair, his knuckles slightly white with the pressure. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than before, but somehow it carried more power than if he had shouted. Joy, I'm going to give you one opportunity right now to walk that accusation back. I've been nothing but respectful to you and everyone on the show despite your sustained, unprovoked hostility. But if you're going to attack my character and my integrity based on false information, based on lies, then we have a serious problem. Instead of heeding the obvious warning in his tone, Joyce seemed to interpret his restraint as weakness, as permission to push even further. She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with what looked disturbingly like malicious satisfaction. "Oh, what are you going to do?" she taunted. "Flex your muscles at me? Prove my entire point about toxic masculinity? Show everyone that when the big tough guy gets called out, he resorts to physical intimidation." The studio was so quiet you could hear individual heartbeats. Even the camera operators seemed to be holding their breath, unsure whether to keep filming or cut away. Johnson stared at Joy for a long moment, and something profound shifted in his expression. The hurt was visible now, not just anger or frustration, but genuine pain at how this was unfolding. Disappointment that another human being could be this needlessly cruel. "You know what, Joy," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but somehow carrying to every corner of the studio with perfect clarity. "I've been in this business for over 2 decades. I've dealt with legitimate critics, with people who don't like my movies, with people who think I'm not a good actor or that I play the same roles repeatedly. That's fine. That comes with the territory of being in the public eye." He paused, and when he continued, there was something raw in his voice that hadn't been there before. Genuine vulnerability breaking through the composed exterior. "But what you're doing right now, this isn't criticism. This isn't journalism or accountability or tough questioning. This is cruelty, pure calculated cruelty. You're sitting there on national television making up stories about me, attacking my character with lies, trying to systematically tear down everything I've worked to build. And for what? What did I ever do to you to deserve this?" Joy's expression faltered slightly, just a flicker, but she wasn't ready to back down. Her ego, too, invested in this confrontation to retreat. "I'm just doing my job, asking the tough questions that need be asked." "No," Johnson said, shaking his head slowly with profound sadness. "Your job is to inform and entertain your audience. What you're doing is using your platform to spread lies and weaponize hatred against someone for reasons I genuinely cannot comprehend. There's a fundamental difference." Whoopi finally found her voice, trying desperately to salvage something. "Maybe we should take a commercial break." No, Joy interrupted sharply, her voice cutting through Whoopi's attempt at rescue. I think our audience deserves to see who Dwayne Johnson really is when he doesn't get his way. When someone dares to challenge his carefully constructed image, Johnson looked at Joy for a long moment, then at the other hosts, then at the audience filled with people who had come excited and were now witnessing something that made them deeply uncomfortable. When he spoke again, his voice was calm, but filled with a sadness that was genuinely heartbreaking to witness. You know, Joy, I feel sorry for you. I genuinely do, because what you're doing right now, the sustained attack on someone who has done nothing to you, it says absolutely nothing about me and everything about you. You're so consumed with tearing people down, so invested in finding the worst in everyone that you can't see or acknowledge good in anything. Oh, please, Joy scoffed. Save the amateur psychology lesson for someone who cares. I've spent my entire career trying to lift people up. Johnson continued as if she hadn't spoken, his voice growing stronger with each word. I've worked with countless charities. I've visited sick children in hospitals without cameras present. I've tried to use whatever influence and platform I have to make the world even slightly better. And you're sitting there in front of millions of people trying to destroy that because why? Because it makes good television. Because you think it makes you look tough or uncompromising. Because tearing down someone universally loved will generate viral clips. Joy's face was red now, whether from anger or the dawning realization that this had gone terribly wrong. It was impossible to tell. You're not the saint you pretend to be, Dwayne. Nobody is. I've never claimed to be a saint, Johnson replied, his voice carrying new strength. I've made mistakes. I've had failures. I've been completely open about my struggles with depression, about my father's battles with addiction, about the challenges and darkness in my life. But I've tried to learn from those experiences and become better. I've tried to be honest about my journey. He stood up slightly in his chair, not in a threatening way, but with the dignity of a man who had reached his absolute limit. But what you're doing here today, Joy, this isn't about making me better or holding me genuinely accountable. This is about you trying to drag someone down to make yourself feel bigger, more important, more relevant, and I will not be part of it anymore. So what? You're going to run away? Joy taunted, but there was desperation creeping into her voice now. Can't handle a little criticism? Johnson looked at her with something that unmistakably resembled pity. Joy, criticism would be saying you didn't like my last movie, or questioning a specific business decision I made, or challenging me on an actual political position I've taken. What you've been doing for the last 30 minutes is character assassination based on fabricated lies. There's a fundamental difference. And if you genuinely can't see that distinction, then I feel sorry for you. The other hosts were now staring at Joy with expressions ranging from disgust to embarrassment. Sonny looked appalled. Sarah looked ashamed to be sitting at the same table. Whoopi looked like she wanted to disappear entirely. The audience was completely silent, but you could feel their mood had shifted dramatically. They had come to see their beloved Dwayne Johnson, and instead witnessed an attempted public execution. You know what the saddest part of all this is? Johnson continued, his voice now carrying a weight that made everyone lean forward despite themselves. You have this incredible platform. Millions of people watch this show. You could use it to highlight real issues, to bring attention to people who genuinely need help, to make a positive difference in people's lives. Instead, you choose to use it for this, for baseless attacks and manufactured outrage. Joy's mouth opened and closed. But for the first time since the interview began, she seemed at a loss for words, a rare moment of speechlessness from someone who made her career out of never being quiet. Johnson looked around the studio one final time, his gaze taking the other hosts who looked mortified, the crew members who seemed shocked, and the audience that had gone from excited to horrified. I think we're done here, he said quietly. And there was something absolutely final in those 4 words that made everyone realize this interview was about to end in a way nobody had expected or wanted. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Johnson slowly, deliberately reached down and unclipped his microphone, the small metallic sound echoing through the studio like a gunshot announcing the end of something. Every movement was controlled, dignified, carrying the weight of a decision made with certainty. And then Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, The people's champion, one of the most beloved figures in entertainment, stood up and walked off. The view set to thunderous applause from an audience that had seen enough, leaving Joy Behar sitting in stunned silence, finally understanding that sometimes even infinite patience has its limits. And cruelty always reveals more about the person inflicting it than the target who walks away with dignity intact. The cameras continued rolling for several more seconds, capturing Joy sitting motionless at the table. Her earlier confidence completely evaporated, replaced by something that looked disturbingly like shock. The other host sat frozen, unsure how to proceed, how to salvage what had just become one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history. Backstage, Johnson was immediately surrounded by his team, publicists, managers, assistants, all speaking at once, asking if he was okay, apologizing for what just happened, trying to assess the damage. But Johnson waved them off gently, his composure remarkably intact, despite what he just endured. "I'm fine," he said quietly, though his hands were trembling slightly, the only physical sign of the emotional toll that confrontation had taken. "I said what needed to be said. There's nothing to apologize for." His publicist was already fielding calls, her phone lighting up with messages from entertainment media outlets, news organizations, and concerned friends in the industry. The clips were already going viral. Number Dwayne Johnson was trending worldwide within minutes, with millions sharing the footage of his dignified exit and Joy's cruel attacks. Back on set, as the show cut to an emergency commercial break, Whoopi turned to Joy with an expression that mixed anger with profound disappointment. "What the hell was that, Joy?" she asked, her voice tight with controlled fury. "We don't ambush guests like that. We don't attack people with lies. What were you thinking?" Joy tried to defend herself, but her voice lacked conviction. "I was just asking tough questions." "Those weren't questions," Sunny interrupted, her voice shaking with emotion. "That was a character assassination. You attacked a man who has done nothing but good in this world, and you did it with lies and manufactured controversies." Sarah nodded, clearly shaken by what she'd witnessed. "I'm honestly ashamed to have been sitting at this table during that. Dwayne Johnson is a genuinely good person, and you try to destroy him for no reason." When the show returned from commercial, the energy was completely different. Whoopi addressed the camera with unusual gravity. "We want to apologize to Dwayne Johnson and to our audience for what just occurred. That's not the kind of conversation we want to have on this show, and it's not representative of our values." Joy sat silently, her earlier aggression replaced by something that looked like dawning comprehension of how badly she had miscalculated. Within hours, the incident had dominated every entertainment news cycle. Think pieces appeared analyzing what had happened, with the overwhelming majority supporting Johnson and condemning Joy's approach. Media critics who had long complained about the degradation of daytime television saw this as a watershed moment, proof that audiences were tired of manufactured conflict and wanted genuine connection instead. Fellow celebrities rallied around Johnson on social media. Kevin Hart posted a supportive message about his friend's grace under pressure. Emily Blunt shared a story about Johnson's kindness on set. Even people who had never met him felt compelled to defend someone who had always represented the best of what public figures could be. The View's ratings actually spiked in the immediate aftermath. People wanted to see what happened, but the long-term damage was undeniable. Sponsors began quietly expressing concern. The network received thousands of complaints, and Joy Behar found herself at the center of a controversy entirely of her own making. For Dwayne Johnson, the incident became another example of his character being tested and proving unbreakable. He never attacked Joy publicly, never sought revenge or retribution. When asked about it in subsequent interviews, he simply said, "Sometimes people are dealing with their own pain, and it comes out in unfortunate ways. I hope she finds peace." That response, grace, in the face of cruelty, only made people love him more. The confrontation became required viewing in media studies classes as an example of how not to conduct an interview and how to maintain dignity when under unjust attack. Students watched in fascination as Johnson defended himself without ever descending to Joy's level, responded to lies with truth, and ultimately chose his mental health and self-respect over staying in a toxic situation. The lesson was clear. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't to fight back harder. It's to walk away with your head held high. And Dwayne Johnson had done exactly that, proving once again why he was called a people's champion. Not because he never faced adversity, but because of how he handled it when it came.